Welcome to Does It Matter? Isn't it funny that most of history's deep, nasty tyrannies and dictatorships and monarchies and imperial ships were upset by more of the same? One of the interesting things, particularly since the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, the ideological revolutions that racked the world and eventually bring us to these progressive times, is that more and more of those hierarchies came from, at least ostensibly, working class or grassroots origins, usually led by a significant number of elites and middle class and bourgeoisie mercantile classes. Those classes and those new thought forms ended up creating some of the most violent, brutal, horrendously unfair societies that have ever existed. They're right up there with some of the classical and worst of the classical and feudal societies. And you got to wonder, in the name of many benevolent causes that we would certainly, especially those on the left, but people on the right and the left would relate to, liberals, conservatives and progressives alike would relate to many of these values, of many of these goals, equality, fraternity, liberty, all the great things. And they devolved into bloody massacres. They devolved into gulags. They devolved into re-education camps. Always with the most benevolent intentions in mind. They devolved into control of language, how you may speak, what you may speak, in an attempt to control how people think. They devolved into the most pernicious moral busybodies that humans are capable of becoming. And the people that led these, there's a nice speckling of psychopaths and sociopaths amongst them. But largely, they were well-meaning, benevolent to at least some degree, well-intentioned folk who became deeply passionate and motivated to unravel the injustice, the systemic injustice that they saw, to unravel the unfairness done to their particular group, or in some cases, if they were communists or socialists, to all people. And look, it's hard to argue with on the surface of it all. It's not. You wouldn't be a human being, a modern human being, particularly in these progressive times, without having some sympathy for it. But within a matter of years, not even decades, most of these regimes that rose up over the last 300-400 years across multiple continents became the perpetrators of the worst, and I mean the worst, travesties of human cruelty and murder in recent history. It seems as if whenever violence or coercion is used, force is used, whether it be legal force or military force or police and judicial force, cultural force, when people are given no choice, when evolution is rushed, forced, the inevitable occurs. The trains, the one-way trains to re-education camps and gulags and those dark places where most never return. The indoctrination, propaganda replacing education, doctrine and dogma replacing robust debate and discussion. We have walked on this knife edge for centuries now, but increasingly so. The left is a toxic mire on its fringes, and those fringes have come to become incredibly powerful. And they scare the living hell out of me. And on the right, well, the right has always had its fanatics, has always had its fair share of fascists and dictatorial robber barons, oligopolists. There's no shortage there either. It's not a side thing here. We're not factional here. No one who's sane is factional. The problem is most of the world isn't sane, not culturally, not politically, not socially. We're tribal as fuck, and we have a tendency to crowd ourselves into a cause, which tends to shut down dispute, debate, argument. It tends to usher in coercive policies, usher in the call for silence, censorship, cancel culture, that kind of thing. We can't have that. I would rather live in a messy but freer society than in the kinds of societies that both the right and the left will attempt to usher us into and are still vociferously trying. They are trying, and make no bones about it. This world is deeply influenced and infested by benevolent busybodies who will ruin you. And they're on the right as much as the left, and they are dangerous. And we need to take great care. Our only defense is rigorous thought, constantly questioning ourselves as much as anything else. If you have a skeptical mindset towards everything, including your own beliefs, you will be very difficult to fool. If, however, I can convince you of an idea to the degree that you will defend it with your life, we are fucked. I have you now. Whoever has convinced you of that has you. You should be able to change your mind with the correct, rigorous evidence, reasonable argument. You should be able to modify that position, if not outright change it, along the lines of empirical proof and evidence, along reasonable, rational lines. Choosing a side is utter lunacy, and yet we are constantly asked by the left and the right to choose a side, and our instincts, our anthropological instincts, those deep-wired caveman instincts, push us to choose a direction. Please don't. And the only way that you can strengthen yourself against this, because I don't think human beings can normally resist this, not for any length of time. It's insidious, it's endless, it's propaganda. It's Goebbels who said during World War II, if you tell a lie often enough, eventually it will be believed. That Nazi propagandist heralded the future. People just say stuff, whether it's a partial truth or a whole truth or a lie, it doesn't matter. They'll say it over and over again. If they're quoting it out of context, they're applying it in a context where it doesn't fit, they'll say it over and over again until people believe it's a universal truth. There's no such fucking thing as a universal truth, and if you're talking outside of physics, there isn't. Most of our truths are useful fictions, and we should get to choose when they apply and how they apply, and we should do that with the best thinking that we can manage. You can't manage that thinking. You can't manage that thinking. You can't manage that peer pressure without being able to take yourself to task, without questioning, with a curious and open mind, why you believe what you believe. Why? I've re-investigated beliefs I have, like, the reasonable fairness of the Ukraine-Russian conflict, and I continue to re-examine it. I haven't seen anything that changes my mind overly yet, though I feel that there's elements of corruption and self-involvement, as there always are, self-interest, as there always is in geopolitics. But generally, my position has stayed the same in favour of Ukraine defending itself so far. I no longer believe in it in quite the same way as I did before, because I've learnt more about who's benefiting and how. And that's always interesting to know. Nonetheless, should something come along that changes my mind on this issue that I've been quite passionate about, I will change my mind in a heartbeat. I'm not expecting to see any evidence to do that. I've been inundated with what some people call evidence, and it has not been convincing. Nonetheless, I am open to it. If you are open to change your mind, you are open to the idea that your most sacred cows can be wrong, then you can build the resilience against the kind of peer pressure and propaganda that we face. It is the greatest assault on us in history. We are commodified, we are commercialised, we are becoming cattle in some respects in our thinking. We are tribalised, we are turned against one another, we are divided and we are conquered, and we don't even fucking know it. Most people don't know it. They have no idea how they're being used and manipulated. And it's not some grand conspiracy. There's no Illuminati out there. They're fighting each other the elites are fighting each other as hard as they're fighting us. Thank goodness for that. But their self-interest aligns a lot of the time. And the way it aligns is to keep us quiescent, docile, and not thinking in ways they don't want us to think. Keep buying stuff. Keep us granular, divided, break up families, destroy communities, destroy interlinks, make sure that networks form that you then deliberately set against each other, make much more, exaggerate the differences between us, exaggerate the conflicts between us, play on those things. Humans have always disagreed, groups have always disagreed and rivaled each other, but they can generally keep peace. But if people are deliberately setting us against each other, deliberately emphasising our differences as opposed to our similarities, and angling them in such a way that those differences don't lead to greater appreciation of each other, but rather adversarial outlooks, who benefits from that? Who's benefiting from that? We need rigour. And that's where the rigour comes in, the rigorous thought. Who benefits from us being tuned up in this way? Who benefits? And follow the money trail. Follow the peddlers of influence back to their dark dungeons. Those self-interested cunts who will turn us into whatever they want if we let them. And they don't care. They'll be dead soon, and their equally spoiled, entitled children will take over. Or the next generation of hard working class or bourgeoisie people who fall into that poisonous pit because you're not getting out of that pit. Yes, there are people who are rich and good. Yes, absolutely. Thank goodness for that. But a lot of them are not. And a lot of them come from toxic cultural and social backgrounds. As abused as that word is, it's appropriate. And those people will do anything to maintain power, control. Power and control. They're terrified. And that sort of, in my roundabout way, comes to why do those benevolent or at least well-meaning, well-intentioned people who lead these revolutions so often turn into the worst, most autocratic, dictatorial regimes, running train cars full of people by the thousands every day to dark places where they never come back, taking people to gulags and torture chambers for their own good, purportedly. It's because of fear. Fear. They're afraid the glorious revolution will be undermined by counter-revolutionary forces from the start. They're afraid that people will die that they don't want to die, even though they have no control over that often. They're afraid of things that they arrogantly assume they have some control over. They're afraid of things that may never happen, but they will certainly improve the odds of happening by being so brutal. And so fear drives them. to become the very thing that they tried to overthrow. And that will happen again and again and again. The kindest, nicest people I have ever seen have in some cases become, selectively at least, some of the most glacial, cruel, myopic folk I've ever seen. I've seen it firsthand. I've read about it since I was a kid. Anyone who doesn't look deeply into their own darkness, deeply into their own error and their own cowardice, can be tricked, can be fooled, can be led to believe a whole bunch of hogwash, and to worse, to do terrible things in the name of that which is good, in the name of kindness, in the name of the greater good. So, self-examination, self-reflection, contemplation, critical thinking, logic, reason, these are what save us. The products of the Enlightenment allowed the development of many different thought forms. Suddenly we weren't just a royalty, one royal dictatorship overthrowing another. We weren't perpetuating the same tired models, we were creating new ones. But a lot of those new ones were dreadful in the long run because we didn't factor in one thing: human nature. And what are humans? Scared primates, fearful, resentful, jealous, angry primates. We're also dreamers and creators, songwriters, spacecraft designers, we're those things too. But when you don't factor in the shadow, as Jung built his entire career on, his entire thesis of knowledge on, if you don't factor in the shadow, you don't consider how human nature functions. When the passions are raised, when commitment is 100%, when absolutism enters the stage, then we're headed for those dark places that we just tried to escape. We can't escape this cycle unless more people start thinking, unless more people start refusing to be railroaded in the name of kindness, in the name of ideology, in the name of the greater good, in the name of anything, good, bad or ugly. Do not allow your brutal self-honesty and your integrity as a thinking being to be railroaded by what you want or what you fear. I want and I fear presage all the misery on the planet. I want or I'm afraid. And from there it all goes to custard. Let's not do that anymore. Let's start doing something else. Let's start thinking. Let's start pausing. Let's start breathing a little deeper, a little slower. Let's relax our bodies, relax our minds, and contemplate how things might look differently, how we might move just a little bit on our position, and how we might think in a different way. That's our genius. That will take us to the stars. That will heal this planet. Nothing else. Us.